As I was doing a year-end cleaning, I found an old diary. How nostalgic. This is my mother's journal.
On February 11, 1980, at 10:05 m, I finally got to meet my adorable baby. My husband and both parents were there to support me, which was very reassuring. This child, who had been inside me for so long, was born to us with a strong cry. His name is David. I hope he grows up to be a person who brings brightness to people's hearts. Since he is the first grandchild for both families, we carefully chose his name. We hope he becomes a shining and warm-hearted person for both families. That's the wish we put into his name. I hope he grows into a wonderful young man.
How nostalgic. My mother had beautiful handwriting. I learned the origin of my name when I grew up, but I had no idea she had such expectations for me.
On February 11, 1981, it's David's first birthday. He's been growing up healthy without any major illnesses or injuries. He's already crawling and pulling himself up, moving around a lot, opening doors, and making a mess. He's a bit too energetic, but I must be a doting parent because I find my own child incredibly cute. I can't help but spoil him. I look forward to seeing what kind of person he'll become as he grows up, although I'm also a little anxious.
It seems I gave my mother quite a hard time when I was little.
On August 21, 1983, David is already 3.5 years old. Today, it seems he was teased by the neighborhood kids while playing at the park. By the time I noticed, David wasn't crying. He was standing up for himself and even gave them a taste of their own medicine. It didn't seem to bother him that they were older. I don't want him to get hurt or get into trouble, but I couldn't help but feel proud that he's growing into a tough little boy.
I don't remember that at all. It's amazing that such a thing happened.
On August 10, 1984, it seems David is getting along well with Anna lately. Today, I talked to Anna's mother, and it turns out Anna was being bullied by some other kids. Poor thing, but David seemed to have protected her from the bullies. I'm so happy that he's growing into a wonderful young man. When I told my husband about it, he was thrilled and praised David a lot. And his mother and I joked that if they got married in the future, we'd become relatives. It might not be such a far-fetched idea after all. And his mother said it's her dream for Anna to become David's bride. And when I suddenly asked David about it, he said he wants to marry Anna. I'm looking forward to their wedding now.
The diary ended here. Yes, my mother passed away when I was 5 years and 6 months old. It was during the Oban festival in August when my parents left me with my grandparents on my father's side and went on a trip together, leaving me in their care for the first time in a while. I remember my grandmother suddenly bursting into tears when she answered the phone around 10 o'clock at night, and my grandfather, who took the phone from her, had a pale face. I, as a child, wondered what was going on. After that, my grandparents and uncles began to prepare something in a hurry. The faces of the people who had been playing with me and smiling just a while ago turned serious, and suddenly, we were on our way to the hospital together. I didn't understand the situation, but I could keenly sense that something serious had happened. When we arrived at the hospital, the room we were led to was dimly lit. Inside, my grandparents, who had entered before me, were in tears. In the middle of the room were my father and mother lying down. My uncle, who had come in with me, also broke down in tears, and I timidly approached my father and mother. "Dad, Mom, please wake up." No matter how many times I called out to them, shouted loudly, or shook them, they didn't wake up. My parents were lying there, still. I finally realized that my parents had become people who wouldn't come back, and I cried until I couldn't make a sound. My father had always told me that men shouldn't cry, and I had promised to become strong without crying as much as possible, but I just kept crying relentlessly. My uncle, feeling sorry for me, tried to console me by saying,
"They will watch over you from heaven."
But I still remember saying, "Why can't I go to heaven too?" I feel sorry about it now, but at that time, no comfort could reach me. My parents had a collision with a speeding truck that had overturned while they were returning from their trip, and the truck hit them. Suddenly losing both parents and being left in the care of my father's family, I had to stop going to the kindergarten I had been attending, and I had an abrupt farewell with Anna too. Everything in the world changed suddenly, and as a young child who couldn't fully accept reality, I wanted to go to the heaven where my parents were. Every night, I would leave the house, searching for the road to heaven. My grandfather would bring me back every day and keep telling me to become strong. I attended a different kindergarten, but my personality had completely changed from before. I didn't want to talk to anyone, and I didn't feel like laughing. I couldn't make friends in such a state, so I ended up just fighting with the kids who would bully me relentlessly. I couldn't overcome the loss and sadness of losing my parents, and no one seemed to understand my situation. No one understood my feelings. I had become someone who would show aggression towards anyone who came near me. Gradually, both the people who used to comfort me and those who bullied me disappeared. I became ignored by everyone, and I was just alone. Even in my grandfather's house, I kept my heart closed. I wandered in the pitch black opposite of the name my parents had given me, just trying to survive. That's how it was. When I was in second grade, still living like that, my grandfather passed away. I ended up living with my grandmother, but she was often ill at that time, and it was financially and physically difficult for her to take care of me. My maternal grandparents had also passed away, so I was placed in a foster care facility. I hadn't seen my uncle since my parents passed away, and we had drifted apart, probably because he refused to accept me. My grandmother cried, apologizing, but I thought it wouldn't be any different no matter where I went, so I went with her to the facility as I was told. While the staff explained the foster care facility to my grandmother and me, another staff member brought in an unfamiliar couple. For some reason, only the three of us were left in the room, while my grandmother and the staff went to another room to talk. The couple started talking to me about various things, what kind of food I liked, what games I enjoyed, and stories about the park near their house. At first, I was as cautious as always, but they spoke to me in a cheerful and gentle tone that didn't waver, even in the face of my guardedness. As I listened to their calm voices, I suddenly recalled my parents for some reason. When I lifted my slightly lowered face and our eyes met, I felt a sense of being enveloped by something. I can't express it well in words, but it was like a feeling of reassurance. The couple had been unable to have children for many years and had come to the foster care facility to inquire about becoming foster parents. They saw me and felt a strong desire to accept me into their family. My grandmother received an explanation about foster parents from the facility staff and was initially surprised and uncertain, but after seeing the gentle demeanor of the couple and observing my interaction with them, she agreed. In the end, I had a choice between living in the foster care facility or going to live with the couple, and I chose to go to the couple's home. However, leaving my sick grandmother alone weighed heavily on my mind. I had started living with my new parents, but even though I had hoped for it, I couldn't easily open my heart to them. That was understandable. I had forgotten how to open up, and before I knew it, years had passed. Plus, losing my father and mother at a young age and not knowing how to interact with parents or how to ask for help made it challenging for me to switch my feelings easily. However, my new mother was always kind, warm, and smiled at me, providing gentle guidance when needed. My father, like my mother, was always kind but could be stern when necessary. They were different from my deceased parents, but there was something about them that felt familiar, reminiscent of my real parents. My heart naturally opened up to my new parents. One day, I developed an unexplained high fever. My new parents rushed me to the emergency room at night, and I had to be admitted urgently. I wondered if I might be going to heaven. I vaguely remember thinking about it in my hazy consciousness. However, at that moment, unlike before, I wanted to live a little longer. I woke up to find my new mother sitting by my bedside, holding my hand. I couldn't help but think about how warm her hand felt, and tears welled up in my eyes. When my mother noticed that I had regained consciousness, she said while crying,
I'm so relieved, truly relieved.
I had been unconscious for 2 days. My mother immediately called my father's workplace, and he rushed over, cutting his work short. I had been having bad dreams all along. Waking up from those bad dreams, I realized that this warmth was the real deal, the warmth of my real parents. It seemed like the joy and familiar sensations deep in the recesses of my heart that I had long forgotten were gradually returning. From that day on, I could sincerely call them Dad and Mom. Time passed, and I reached my senior year of high school, the time to think about my future path. While my friends were still pondering their futures, I had already decided on a career, becoming a firefighter. My goal was to join the rescue team, to save as many lives as possible. The desire had become my driving force over the years, even though I had long forgotten it. Fueled by that aspiration, I dedicated myself to studying and exercising toward my dream throughout high school and college. Eventually, I successfully passed the firefighter recruitment exam. My parents were overjoyed, and my mother said,
"We should go tell your grandmother too."
so I headed to my grandmother's place, even though I had been afraid to return there since the second grade. When I met my grandmother after a long time, she seemed much smaller than before. However, after I had been taken in, my uncle had been taking care of my grandmother, and her health had not deteriorated. She was living well and in good spirits. I felt relieved. My grandmother was surprised and teary-eyed when she saw me, who had grown so much. She cried again, happy about me becoming a firefighter. Then, she handed me a diary that my deceased mother had intended to give me when I became an adult. As I read it, tears flowed uncontrollably. I could feel how much I had been loved and raised, the emotions behind the choice of my name, what kind of child I had been, my mother's feelings, and my father's thoughts. I felt a deep connection with them. From then on, I read that diary every day. As I read it repeatedly, I started to remember Anna, whom I had erased from my memory due to the sadness of our parting. I wondered what she was doing now. Even after becoming independent, I would sometimes return to my father and mother's house to have meals with them. And one day, I brought up the topic of Anna. Then my mother looked puzzled and asked,
"Do you remember Anna's last name?"
I told her the last name of Anna that was written in the diary, and she exclaimed,
"No way."
and brought out an album for some reason. I was surprised when I saw the photos my mother showed me. In those photos, there was unmistakably Anna. She was right there, in the childhood photos I had seen at my grandmother's house, alongside me. It turned out that Anna's mother and my current mother had been best friends since high school, and they still occasionally visited each other's homes. What a coincidence! My mother called Anna's mother, and they made plans for the four of us to meet. The last time we had seen each other was when we were kids. Although I had some reservations, I was curious about Anna, so I agreed to meet her. When I saw Anna again after such a long time, I was surprised to see that she had grown into a lovely woman, bearing a slight resemblance to her childhood self. Anna's mother told us about my deceased mother, our childhood memories, and many other things. Annie and I reminisced about the past, and during that time, both of our mothers encouraged us to start dating, as neither of us had a partner at the time. 2 years have passed since then. Time flies by so quickly. When the new year comes, Anna and I plan to visit my parents' graves together to share the news. We're going to get married.